The next speaker that we are going to welcome to the stage is Leslie MacKenzie. Leslie is an organizer for the organization Transition Twin Cities, which is a hub for 7 active transition groups operating in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. She co-founded the Transition Longfellow in 2011 after hearing about the timeline and real-life impacts of climate change from the Post-Carbon Institute. So within a year, she actually quit her corporate job in order to help ordinary citizens, her neighbors, take action on climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So we'll hear more from Leslie about her work.
So I'm Leslie MacKenzie, and I'm with Transition Longfellow. Longfellow is a neighborhood that encompasses 4 additional neighborhoods in South Minneapolis. And we are a small group, but we're connected with 5 other groups here in the Twin Cities, and some of those people are here today too. I'm also attached to the Transition US, which is our network across the United States. There are hundreds of groups that are formal or informal groups, and we are part of the global transition network. So there are thousands of groups across the planet. These are all citizen-based groups. So we don't actually know how many groups there are because people don't have to register. You can just start it. You don't need someone's permission, you don't need to pay money, and you don't need to fill out forms. You just do stuff. So why do these citizen groups exist? Because more and more citizens are understanding the challenges that we're facing, and we're seeing the signs around us. So here in Minnesota, we expect to see flooding in Fargo-Moorhead, but we don't expect to see it in Duluth. That has never happened. We expect to see tornadoes. They're here in June. They're not usually here on March 6th, and that's what happened in Zimmerman, Minnesota. So we are already seeing significant changes in our communities. Transition US, the headquarters is in Northern California, and the staff had to be evacuated because of fires. So that's informing the work that they're doing with citizens in their area to think about preparedness efforts. The transition movement helps people understand the interconnection of the problems and the solutions. So how did we get into this place? It takes a permaculture approach of understanding things as a system and helping ordinary citizens see these connections. So while it might be something that you learned in school or something that you do every day in your work, most citizens haven't really thought about it. So this is neighbors helping neighbors to understand how these different things fit together. The transition slogan is, there's no time to wait. Transition was created as an answer and an antidote to feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. The founder of the group wrote a book called The Power of Just Doing Stuff. So transition groups focus on action and doing something. Just starting something. Start it where you are. Start it with the people who are next to you, with your family members or your neighbors. So in 2005, this guy, Rob Hopkins, was a permaculture teacher at a university in Kinsale, Ireland. And he challenged his students to figure out how they could make their community more resilient in the face of rising energy costs. So their community was completely dependent on energy from other places. How could they get away from it? His permaculture students came up with a plan, as far as I know, the world's first energy descent action plan called an EDAP. They brought it to their town council, which approved it, and they've been working on implementing it ever since. Rob went further and tackled the real challenge, which is not our technology, but our way of thinking. He moved to Totnes, England, and that is the first transition town in the world in Totnes, England. And this was his question: how do we help people embrace this change? as a collective adventure, a common journey, as something that's positive, that we want to do. If you spend much time watching Hollywood's vision of the future, you might think that you're preparing for a zombie apocalypse. But transition says we could envision something that is positive, lower energy, lower carbon. We could envision having better access to safer and tastier food. We could envision having more people understand how to grow food. So as our food system faces challenges because of climate change, more people are able to tackle that task. We could envision that when we have a tornado, like we did in North Minneapolis, our neighbors know each other, and we know who needs help, and we're there to help each other because we are our own first responders. How do we prepare more people to respond, and how do we just get people to know each other? We can imagine that there are places and spaces in every community where people can meet and interact in meaningful ways. There are serious challenges ahead, and transition doesn't minimize that, but we can't live healthy, fulfilling lives if we're always pushing against something. We need to live for something. So transition starts with this vision of what are we living into. It's about a new story. So these are some pictures from my transition group. Transition groups aren't study groups. They're not really doom and gloom. Let's dig into the problem. We already know the problem. They might do book groups or movie nights or bring in speakers, but a critical part of what they do is create opportunities for people to learn together and to share what they know. So taking action in and of itself is psychologically protective. It also needs to be fun. It needs to be productive. For example, my group has installed 183 raised bed gardens in people's yards in the past 6 years. We partner with master gardeners to teach people how to grow food. We host food Skillshare days, which are people sharing what they know about preserving and preparing food. And people come and have fun doing that. We hosted the one in the middle. We taught people how to sew insulated curtains. So if you've got a 150-year-old house, you may have very bad windows. You might want to be turning up the thermostat all the time, or you could install an insulated curtain, and you could learn how to sew. Do you want people to be using mass transit more? Transition groups don't talk about transit. They take people to transit. So Transition All St. Anthony Park has a Meet the Bus event. And they go and they ride the bus to someplace. And they teach people who've never taken the bus, when do you put the money in? How do you know how you're going to get from here or there? These are the powers of social networks, because they can make it things that seem, these barriers, they just aren't such a big barrier if you're doing it with your neighbor. Climate preparedness is one of the activities that Transition Longfellow has done. We did a 6-part speaker series. We accessed our state health department and our city health department to provide some speakers for us. But we also invited other knowledgeable people in our community. So when we talked about the potential for power outages, we had someone talk about how to take care of your dog, cat, or chicken in a heat wave if you have a power outage. We had someone talk about how to waterproof your basement. So we're giving climate information, but we're also putting it into the context of immediate and useful solutions. That last one, we taught people how to build solar cookers. And then we teach people how to solar cook. You have stacking benefits when you do things together. We have the opportunity to model behavior change. We have the ability to have complex and long-term conversations about things in our culture that we never get to question, but you might question it over a glass of wine. Things like, do we really all need to have a personal vehicle available for immediate use at any time? Do we need to have meat at every meal and apples from New Zealand? Do we need to have a new computer or a new phone every 2 years? Things that our culture thinks are normal. But really, we've lived for thousands of years without those things. So having raising these things to visibility and inviting people to think about the decisions that they're making and to find ways to live differently. Like sharing, I decided not to fly. So how am I going to get someplace? How will I make a decision about where I'm going to go or not go, or how I'm going to do that? Starting to make these normal conversations. A lot of the environmental messaging is fear-based, and we think that that will get people to change, and there's certainly some, I work in marketing, fear works, but it doesn't work the way we think it does, and really it causes a lot of people to withdraw from our message. So transition groups have this thing called the inner transition, and it's about our emotional response to how things are happening, and it's about a way of being. And if anyone read Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, she said this about transition, and I'm paraphrasing it. We need spaces to grieve and to talk. We have to go through our own personal transformation. The transition movement is addressing this reality. It understands that when you challenge people's worldviews, you have to stick around to pick up the pieces. So transition is not a one-off. It's not, I'm going to go to this event and learn this terrible news. I might learn some terrible news, but I'm not learning it alone, and these people are going to stay with me. We're going to have dinner together again next month. We might watch a different show. We might go on another field trip. But if I'm feeling anxious in the middle of the night, I have somebody there I can talk to. That's what a citizen group can do. It's a place where people can be free to feel. So when I talk to organizations about why they might want to partner with a transition group, I can say, you know what, we can say things you can't say because we're just friends. So EcoDistricts are about focusing on equity, resilience, and climate preparedness, and that's what transition groups are also all about. You tackle really big things. We tackle the things that make big things possible, like changing how people think about things. So our work can deepen the work that you do in community. In Europe, transition groups are really big. They encompass entire towns and regions, and people are working together on really big projects, and they engage thousands of people. That hasn't really happened as well in the US. We do have some towns that are entire transition towns, like Media, Pennsylvania, and Berea, Kentucky. There are towns with hubs, like the Twin Cities, which has numerous small groups, and Los Angeles, which has numerous small groups. We could have a lot more impact if we work together in partnership. One of our challenges in the US is about our lack of community space, our lack of a commons. A lot of groups face real challenges finding places to meet. Just a mile away from here, there's a community that would like to start a group. They don't have a restaurant, a bar, a coffee shop, a church. They don't even have a park building that they can use because it was given away to a business. They have to leave their neighborhood in order to meet for more than 10 people. Finding ways that whenever something new is built or rebuilt, to think about the community and how we can create space for democracy, space for engagement, that doesn't cost people money. Groups like mine, we operate on $1,000 a year, and we do 6 programs a month. For that low amount of money, it's all done by volunteers. Community members often bring really different ideas and different values to the table. They have access to different community resources, or they see things as resources that others may not. They have informal networks that they can access and bring to the table, and they may have simpler solutions. So Transition Longfellow hosted an low energy, no energy energy fair. So you're used to hearing from the energy companies about how you can do X, Y, Z. Well, we talked to people about how they could not use energy at all for some of the things that they're doing. Alternative ROI. I'd like to bring that up because we're all very concerned about how to measure things. But what are we measuring? What is the goal that we think we need to get? Slow money Minnesota. People who are investing in slow money, really patient money, they're not looking to get 10% or 7% returns. They're looking for a safe, affordable food system and regenerative farms. A young person came to my yard to tell me about why he talked his parents out of installing solar panels because the return on investment was not going to be good. And I said, your parents have invested 25 years of their life and probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in you and your education. You are their investment. And when they're putting solar panels on their roof, what they want is your continued life. That's their biggest return. So don't talk them out of that. People want to have an impact. Ordinary citizens want to have an impact too. And often we're not engaged until after all the planning has been done, and now we get to come in and we get to say something, and then we leave and we never hear anything back. So have we been engaged in a really meaningful way where we can continue to engage and help something to become successful? It would be great to invite citizens in ways that they can actually do what they're best at, building relationships, staying in place, caring over time. So these are a few of the things. We have a time bank in our community. There are free stores. That one in the bottom is a gleaning project in Sarasota, Florida. We have a parent group that meets our parents are really interested in zero waste activities. We are a little harder to partner with because we're not official. A lot of us aren't 501c3s. We don't have a lot of the structures that make it easy to work with us. But we often have much greater reach into community because people who are well connected will be the hub. So putting in the extra effort to try to find us, and if we're in groups like transition groups, we're a little easier to find. But some of those really key people who are out there in the community that you might not have access to, people like recent retirees, they have amazing skills, they still have networks, and suddenly they have some time, and they really want to do something. Moms with grown kids, they are free, and they have great organizing skills. Grandparents are super passionate about the future of their grandchildren. They really want to do something. Church groups, moms groups. In transition, a number of our volunteers have been people with chronic illnesses. They can't work a regular job anymore, but they still have a lot of skills, and they still really care. What groups have is a social network, and when you are trying to implement something that requires lasting behavior change, these three strategies are the most effective strategies you can use. Role modeling, social norms, and social diffusion. Those all come from networks, social networks. So, start something. Anybody can start a transition group. They would love to connect with other organizations. Our group connected with our city health department to do climate adaptation work this year. And we were able to bring different people to the table than they would have had access to otherwise. So I would encourage you to look around and see if there's a group in your area, or, as our previous speaker mentioned, creating your partners. So providing an opportunity for people to gather and continue to gather to discuss issues. And our work is creating smaller footprints and stronger communities. I think that jibes very well with what you do. That's it. Thank you.